Indeed, God is present here and now. And in the awareness of God present, let us pray. Father, Mother God, we give thanks for this opportunity to be open to the awareness of your presence here, now. In our practice of the awareness of your presence, we carry this forward into each and every waking moment, open and receptive to your guidance. Open and receptive to your nurturing love. As we feel your love moving through us, transforming us, healing us, lifting us. We accept this, and we know also, for those in our experience who seem to have a need for the awareness of your love, that it is available to them as well. So for those in our experience that seem to have this need, we hold them in consciousness, and we see them embraced, lifted, transformed by your love. Thankful for the opportunity to be ministers of your word. We open ourselves to this transformation of being an active presence in this world. And for this, we give thanks. And so it is that together we say, Amen. Strive to thrive. Well, hey, happy Super Bowl Sunday. A young man, the Super Bowl was coming to Houston for the first time in a long time, and a young man who was out on his own, he decided, I'm just going to take a flyer. I'm going to see if there's a Super Bowl ticket available. And so he went on Craigslist, and sure enough, there was a listing for a Super Bowl ticket that landed on Craigslist just the minute before he inquired. And so he scarfed it up. It was $150. That wasn't too bad. So he got to the stadium, and he looked at the ticket, and well. So he found that the ticket was in the nosebleed section. It was last row, end zone. And he figured, I can barely see the scoreboard from there, but that's okay. But he got up there, and he said, I wonder if anybody is absent down below. And so he wandered back down, and he was going through the bleachers, and he saw that there was a seat right there behind the team bench. And 50-yard line, so he went down, and there was an empty seat there, and he said to the fellow next to it, is there anyone sitting there? The fellow said, no. He said, do you mind if I take that? He said, no, go ahead. Sat down, enjoying the game, and he turned to the fellow, and he says, so I wonder why no one showed up for this seat. He says, that was my wife's. That was my wife's seat. And he said, well, isn't she coming? He said, no, she's dead. And the fellow says, well, that's too bad. Surely you had some friends that could use this ticket. Why didn't you give it to them? And he said, well, because they were all at the funeral. There's a fellow who had his priorities right. Well, as you know, back in the time when we had the White Stone ceremony and you gave yourself a new name, I also at that time requested that you give me a list of topics that you would, or give me a topic that you would like to have covered in subsequent talks. And being the kind of guy I am, not wanting to work very hard to come up with new topics, I accepted that list, and so we have covered, thus far, we've covered these things, but we also have not just surviving, but thriving in our current national climate, physical healing, an end to inertia, and serving God through serving mankind, and some kind of definition of what is transformation. So we're going to be looking at, as you can tell from the talk title, we're going to be looking at the question of thriving. So what does thriving mean to you? Thriving really is a very personal thing, isn't it? You have friends that have certain ideas and goals that are different from yours, and they seem to some extent or another, they seem to be happy with what they're doing. But at the same time, you have certain goals and objectives that you would like to achieve, and you may or may not be feeling like you're thriving. You may, in fact, just feel like you're surviving. So what this means to us is really a fairly personal thing. We can describe what thriving means to us, and we can somehow picture it, although thriving tends to be an ephemeral kind of thing that it's hard to get our hands around. Some might say, well, thriving is having a very full bank account. But I think that those who have full bank accounts would be very persuasive in convincing us that that's not the case. And so thriving is a very personal thing. Sometimes it's difficult to describe. But most importantly, can we feel what thriving is like? Feeling what thriving is like is really going to be a much better indicator of whether or not we have achieved that which we are searching for. Excuse me. Thanks to whoever put that water there. Tastes like it's today's water, so that's good. Thriving is something that we often don't address. We tend to be in the surviving mode, and thriving seems to be something that, well, I'll get to that at a later time. But here's one person's perspective on what it means to thrive. Interesting that for this one person, and this came out of Psychology Today, it was a writing by a psychologist who, based upon her work with clients, came to this as her list of things that indicate that she is thriving. Laughing in delight, being playful with others, getting good sleep, being physically active, practicing and experiencing mindfulness. That is, being aware of the moment to moment. Attending to the beauty of the natural world, eating well and enjoying healthy food, expressing creativity, caring for others and getting caring when you need it, practicing gratitude, enjoying uplifting experiences that take you beyond yourself, confiding in at least one close friend, not succumbing to temptations too frequently, maintaining practices that foster positive self-development, learning to prefer what is good and healthy, finding a mentor for areas where you want to improve, knowing how to let go and put annoying things in perspective, find ways to gradually increase in efficacy and competence for the things you want to accomplish. It goes on. Having at least one close, loving relationship, having a group of people on whom you can rely if needed, having at least one confidant who can help you over rough patches, taking risks to connect to and help others, mentoring others with whatever knowledge, skills, and wisdom you have, doing kind things for others whenever you can, making amends with those who have wronged you or you have wronged them, feeling connected to the community, feeling in relationship to other living beings in the natural world. See, it goes on and on. You didn't realize that thriving included all these things, right? Feeling like you're making a valuable contribution to the community, feeling a positive purpose that reaches beyond yourself, feeling like others care for you, practice compassionate Meditation that starts with compassion towards oneself. Being in touch with your heart feelings, using healthful ways to calm yourself down from anxieties, fears, and angers. Not desiring too much, forgiving oneself and others, doing things that foster positive social feelings in yourself instead of angry or contemptuous feelings. Meaningful vocation or avocation. Phew! So, with those ideas, consider, what does thriving mean to you? And how would you list those things? How would you express those things? It's useful to take some time to do that. It's useful to sit down and say, okay, well, what does thriving mean to me? What's important to me? What are the relationships that I have in my life? And how do those relationships unfold when I am thriving? What is my condition? What is my career or vocation or avocation? What are the things that are important to me now? And how am I addressing achieving those? So this is what we're challenging. This is what I'm challenging you to take some time to consider. And you know, the letter to myself, which we still have some forms out there on the desk. If you are interested in taking that letter and putting it into the context of what it is that I need for me to thrive, write it down as a form of a letter to yourself and bring it back next week. And I'll mail it out to you in June or so, and you can have a touch point at that time as to what you thought was important to you now. So, thriving is a very personal thing. It's based upon our experience, and it's based upon our intentions. This process of going through the thriving, there's a thing called a thriving pyramid. And this thriving pyramid, the striving pyramid, begins with this idea of surviving. Indeed, that's an important part, right? We need to survive in order to move up into our pyramid. Now, those of you who are familiar with Maslow's pyramid of self-actualization, it starts with a broad base and it goes to a peak, right? To a point. Well, I chose to show the striving pyramid as a growing pyramid, okay? We start with this essence of, we got to survive, but then there are other stages that allow us to expand and to grow. The next is discovering. Discovery. Okay, so I'm surviving. Yeah, I'm getting the food I need. I've got the shelter I need. Now, there must be more things. There must be new ways of being. There must be more that I can learn. That was an experience that I had back in 1987 when a friend of mine took me through a session of therapeutic touch. And up to that point in time, I was frankly just surviving. Yeah, I had this wonderful 4-year-old daughter, and I had this wonderful life mate, soulmate, and on the other hand, I wasn't satisfied with what I was doing. I had a little bit of employment. It wasn't very nurturing employment, but I felt like I was just surviving. And so this friend took me through this experience of therapeutic touch where I had this awareness that there was something more than just my physical body. I had the experience of an inner realm of energy. And she was manipulating that energy through therapeutic touch where she was balancing my chakras. And these were words that I had heard before, but I didn't really have an appreciation for what that was about. So this idea that there was something more than just my physical body was a revelation to me. I was 40 years old at the time, okay? So I had actually had a wonderful childhood. I had education. I had some jobs that I was challenged by. And some of my bosses considered me to be overly challenged by those jobs and suggested I find employment elsewhere. But I really had a wonderful, expansive youth. But I was finding myself coming back into this point of just surviving. Well, discovering. Discovering for me was that realm of that inner realm of energy that we all possess. Then there it goes through this time of suffering. This time of suffering when, we're surviving and we're not really suffering yet because we're just working on getting the food down, working on finding the shelter and so on. We go to the discovery of, oh my God, there's more things, and now we get into this stage of suffering as, oh man, there are more things. How can I experience it? So we find the limitations and the constraints that have engulfed us. And then through that period of suffering, we come to a point where we need to decide, okay, am I going to continue with this path that I have been on, continuing in my suffering, or am I going to make a change? Well, for me, I decided that I was going to make a change. And so in this deciding stage, then we come to the awakening stage. And the awakening stage is where we realize that, oh yeah, it is a choice. I have these choices. I don't have to be imprisoned by the way I've done it before. I don't have to be imprisoned by the path that I seem to have been on before because I have a choice. And that awakening is the time when I fully realize that, okay, now I can be aware of these things. I can explore these things. I can expand in this direction, or I can expand in that direction. I can take on new talents. I mean, for me, one of the new talents, I was absolutely petrified of standing up in front of a group. So one of the obstacles that I had to overcome when I went into ministry was that, oh my God. Those of you who were here last week when I was holding Mackenzie, and she looked out. Well, that was the way I felt when I first decided to get into ministry. Oh my God! For those of you who weren't here, I have a 7-month-old granddaughter, and she has been in front of maybe 5 people, 6 people at a time as the maximum. And so I had her in my arms up here, using her as a prop for my talk. And she looked around and she saw all these faces, and she just went into this progressive terror. Well, that was how I felt when I went into ministry in terms of speaking in front of people. But then we come, after the awakening stage, we come into the thriving stage where we are now actually not just exploring, but we are gaining proficiency in these various areas that we want to grow into. And we're feeling good about it, okay? We're feeling like we have not necessarily mastery, but we have some proficiency with these things that we're striving for. Whether it's proficiency in meditation or proficiency in relationships or proficiency in whatever endeavor that we are really motivated to pursue. So that's the thriving stage. And then there is the transcending stage. And the transcending stage is when we have come to the realization that, okay, I've chosen this path. I am proficient in this path. I'm perhaps gaining mastery in this path. But there are other paths for me to strive for. Okay? There are other things that I want to do. There are other areas that I want to expand and grow. So this transcending is a stage where we take what we have learned along this path, and we are now able to realize that there are more things that we can do, more things that we can expand within, more things that we can achieve proficiency in. And so we take what we have learned along this path and we start to broaden our horizons. So this striving pyramid is one, the striving pyramid is one that we can all progress through. And to one extent or another, we are progressing. Just the fact that you're here means that you're here, right? That you have been successful in surviving. And some of you being here are here perhaps because you want to discover. Maybe you're realizing the suffering stage that you're in. Maybe you are, in fact, deciding to grow and to expand, probably the reason that you're here. And awakening. Yes, that's probably, you're probably experiencing that as well. The question is whether or not you're into the thriving and transcending stage. I don't know. That's up to you. But as we consider this path, that is fairly common path that we all share, this pyramid, we realize that I really do have a choice. I really do have a choice. How am I going to address this next moment? How am I going to occupy my next day? How am I going to build my next week? How am I going to grow into my next month and my next year? These things we have, in fact, the opportunity to choose. And when we are empowered to choose those things, then we are truly on this path towards transcendence. And transcendence is not just in the material world, but transcendence is also in the spiritual world. And it's not surprising that I might address transcendence in the spiritual world, right? Okay, so this pyramid gives us a picture of what we are about. And as we decide these things that we want to explore, these areas that we want to expand, we are really into that creative process, right? And this creative process is one that, as Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, as he expressed it, the creative process is the process of taking these things out of the realm of ideas and bringing them into the realm of form. So whether it be a change of relationship, an expansion of relationships that seem to be somewhat ephemeral, well, that would still be regarded as the realm of form, in the realm of manifestation. And you've seen this. I'm going to come back to that. You've seen this graphic that I've had before. All is divine mind. There is no boundary on divine mind. That's the reason for the dashed lines around this graphic. But the divine mind is all that is all. And within that divine mind, we are attempting to create by changing ideas into form. And we are doing that out of the realm of substance through to manifestation. And that process involved thought. It is that great power that we have in the creative process to be the thinker, right? I am the thinker who thinks the thoughts. Indeed, we are. This is really our power right here, is the thinking process. And when we are intentional in developing that thinking process, we go through the inspiration stage, we go through the intention stage, we go through the assumption stage, and then the attention stage. And these four stages, from inspiration through attention, these four stages are really how we choose to explore and to expand in our creative process. The inspiration is one where it comes out of aha. That aha may come from a relationship, a conversation. It may come from an exposure that you have to new material. It may come from revisiting old things and old experiences. And you may come to a realization, oh, wow, that's what that was about. So this inspiration is one that seems to magically bubble up. But truly, it is part of our experience as divine beings to be the recipient of these inspirations. Once we have the inspiration, then we decide, and now we're in the decision stage, and then we decide where we're going to focus our energies. What is our intention? Then we come to that assumption stage, and the assumption stage can be empowering or it can be disempowering, depending upon how you approach it. The assumptions that you take on that say that I can do anything, right? if we have that assumption, I can do anything, and anything is possible, I will have the resources that are necessary when I need them. All of those are empowering assumptions. There are disempowering assumptions. What are some of the disempowering assumptions? Disempowering assumptions is, I'm not going to have the resources that I'm going to need. Or somebody's tried this before and it didn't work. Or I tried this before and it didn't work. So we have assumptions that can curtail and disempower our creative process. And we have assumptions that can empower and expand our creative process. And then once we are moving through that stage of assumption. And it's not a stage that is static. That is, we don't just move through it, but we constantly are using and bringing up assumptions. But then we take to our attention, and once we focus our attention on a process or a goal or something that we're wanting to achieve, such as thriving, then we move into the stage of manifestation. All of this requires that we have faith. We have faith that we have the power, we have the resources, we have the wherewithal to make this happen. And the thing that will shut this down is fear. This fear is going to shut down this process. So the question is, how do we resolve the fear? That came up last week, right? We were talking about courage. And we talked about unconditional love. Franklin Roosevelt offered us this: the only limit to our realization of tomorrow will be our doubts of today. Let us move forward with strong and active faith. Indeed, let's move forward with strong and active faith. Now, as we consider this whole process, as we consider our intention to thrive, this is really a creative process, is it not? It is truly a creative process, and one that will challenge us. Oftentimes, the assumptions about thriving, and about what is necessary to thrive and what is available to us to thrive, can shut down this process. Fear can shut down this process. But I'll go back to, and this is where I had the slides out of the wrong order. We'll just have to back up here because I don't have a quick reverse. But these are the great teachings about thriving. You know, there are some religious traditions that insist that you must know Scripture if you're going to achieve what you're trying to achieve according to the teacher that was the founder of that religion. Well, I don't consider that to be necessary. There's a lot of stuff in the Bible, and I know people that take pride in having book, chapter, and verse memorized. And they can pull a passage out of Scripture to substantiate their argument. Well, I only see a few, and I've just listed the top 3 in my book, 3 passages that are important for us to grok, for us to know at a visceral level. And that is, love God with all your heart, love your neighbors as yourself. That, in my mind, is the number 1 directive, referred to as the 2 great commandments, but it's the number 1 directive that comes out of the gospel. Love God with all your heart, love your neighbor as yourself. We covered that last week. That is what unconditional love is about. It's not defining your giving of love based upon some condition. It's not based upon some fulfillment of a contract in this world with a relationship, but rather it is giving love regardless. The second is, what I have done, you can do also. And in John 14:12, Jesus offered us that. Now, it's interesting that John is, as I've often pointed out, John is the most metaphysical of the books of the Bible, and it was the gospel that was written the latest after the crucifixion. So we must realize that the contents of John are to a greater extent than the other gospels, divorced from the teachings of Jesus by the longest period. Okay? But at the same time, this is This is a critical truth that survived that 70 to 90 years from the crucifixion through the teachings that were being passed among the various communities that were teaching the ways of Jesus. What I have done, you can do also. For me, this statement is an empowering statement because it says very clearly that Jesus was not unique other than his realization of the Christedness that he was. But what he has done, we can do also. Why? Because the Christ in you is your hope of glory. That is a teaching from Paul, or supposedly from Paul. But this idea that the Christ is in each and every one of us, that we are harbors of the Christ, this is a realization that we need to continue to realize, to make real in our experience. We need to continue to realize that we are the harbors of Christ. And when we can realize that, when we can approach every relationship, every situation, every condition with the realization that we are the harbors of Christ, we are the expression of God in this moment. We are the contributors of the divine energy to this relationship, to this condition. Then we can move forward with confidence. We can move forward with the realization that we will be guided. And as we indeed realize that what Jesus did, we can do also, we realize that we are empowered. And then when we practice love God with all your heart, love your neighbor as yourself, we move through every condition with the realization that we are God in this moment. We are the expression of God in this moment. When we are fully in that mode of expressing God in this moment, we are not just thriving, but we are transcending. We are transcending the limits of our assumptions. We're transcending the limits of our body. We're transcending the limits of our perception. And we are moving into this realm of being. Purely being. And what a power that is. We'll have our meditation this moment as we rest in this moment. Realizing the Christ in each of us. The Christ is in me, the Christ is in you, the Christ is in you, and 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 you. The Christ is in each and every one of us. Wow. The things I have done, you can do also, says Jesus. Wait a minute. Really? Really? We can choose what we believe. And that belief is an empowering belief. So in this time of quiet, we accept the truth that I can do what Jesus did and more. I am a Christed being, living in this moment, expressing God in this moment, because I am loving God with all my heart, and I am loving my neighbors as myself, regardless of the conditions, regardless of the actions, words, implications, thoughts. I love you. I love you. I love you unconditionally. Expressing God's love in this moment. Expressing God in this moment. Wow. There is nothing that limits me. Oh, conditions may change, circumstances may arise, limitations may appear to be in my path, but stepping forward, loving God with all my heart, loving my neighbor as myself, realizing I can do what Jesus did, and knowing that I am the harbor of the Christ. Therein lies my power. Because it's not my power. It is my expression of the power each of us has. Moving from survival to discovery, through that yuck of suffering, into the deciding and awakening, thriving and transcending. I arise from the fire of my suffering into the expression of God in this moment. And for this, we give thanks. And as we come back into this time and space, let us come back sharing the words of the Lord's Prayer.